Hi everyone, it's Ian here from Crack Maths and welcome to tutorial 50 on how to calculate the surface area of a cylinder. Okay, so for this tutorial you've actually already learned everything that you need to know to complete this question. But what you need to really now know is how to put it all together. So before we get started, I'm just going to quickly tell you the three skills that you know, and then we're going to move on to how we piece this all together for finding the surface area of a cylinder. So the three key things that you need to know are: one, how to find the area of a circle, which is area of a circle equals pi r squared. Two, you need to know the area of a rectangle, which is going to be length times width. And third, you need to remember how to find the circumference of a circle, okay? Because that is going to give us the dimensions of one of the rectangles. And so circumference of a circle is pi times diameter, or remember, pi times radius times 2, because the diameter is equal to the radius times 2. Okay, right. Before we get started on this, I just want us to think about a cylinder and to think about what a surface area is. So let's say I've got a cylinder here with a radius of 4 centimeters and a height of 10 centimeters. What we need to be able to do with this is we need to think about what the surface area of this shape means. And the surface area, remember, is basically the 2D shapes that are comprised to make this cylinder. So imagine if you were making a cylinder out of paper, what shapes would you need to have on you to put together to make this shape? Okay, hopefully you've kind of thought about it. And the answers to this is going to be we need two circles. So we're going to need that circle on the top and that circle on the bottom. So those circles with radius 4 centimeters. And then what we're going to need is a piece of paper that we wrap all the way around. Okay, so that piece of paper is going to have one dimension, which is the height of this cylinder, which we've said is 10 centimeters, and one dimension, which is the circumference of the cylinder. Okay, and that's going to be something we're going to have to work out. So that's why I've said we need to know how to work out the area of a circle, we need to know how to work out the area of a rectangle, and we need to know how to work out the circumference of a circle. Okay, so let's just complete this example before we go on to a question. So the areas of these two circles are both given to us by pi r squared. And so we know that the radius is 4. So this is going to be 3.14 times 4 times 4. Okay, and so that is 50.24. And so we've got two of those. So I'm just going to write that down here. 50.24, add 50.24. And then we need the area of the rectangle. So remember, we've got one dimension already, which is the 10 centimeters. The other dimension is the circumference. The circumference is given to us by pi times diameter. But in this case, we've got the radius. So we're going to do pi times the radius times 2. So radius times 2 is 8. 8 times 3.14 is 25.12. Okay, so now we know that the one dimension is 25.12 centimeters. The other dimension is 10 centimeters. We can do length times width to get the area of the rectangle. So 25.12 times 10 equals 251.2. So now to get the total surface area of this shape, what we've got to do is we just add these three things together. So 251.2, add 50.24, add 50.24. Let's work that out. Okay, and that gives us 351.68 centimeters squared. Now remember, even though it's a 3D object, we have found out the surface area. So this is still an area, so the answer is still in squares. So this is 351 centimeters squared. Okay, right. There's a lot to this question. It's actually the hardest part about surface area of a cylinder is keeping your flow and not forgetting what you've done and what you've done here. So remember, we find out the circles, we then find out the circumference, then we times the circumference by the length. Okay, so let's have a look at a question. So here we go, we've got question 1 here, and it says, calculate the surface area of a cylinder if the radius is 9 centimeters and the height is 10 centimeters. I'm going to draw out my shapes here just to remind myself of what I've got to do. So I've got two circles and one rectangle. So the circles are nice and easy. So they are pi r squared, which is going to be 3.14 times 9 times 9. So I'm just going to work that out. Okay, so here we go. The area of the two circles in this cylinder is going to be 254.34 centimeters squared. Okay, and now I've got the rectangle. And so remember, one of the dimensions of the rectangle is the 10 centimeters, which is from the height. And the other dimension of the rectangle is the circumference of the circle. So let's calculate the circumference of the circle. Remember, the formula for circumference is pi times diameter, or pi times radius times 2. Okay, so let's work out radius times 2 first. So we've got 9 times 2 equals 18, and then 18 times 3.14. So 18 times 3.14 gives us 56.52. And now we can write that on our rectangle. So we've got one side is the circumference, which is 56.52. The other side is 10 centimeters. So now we can multiply these two together to get the area of this rectangle. 56.52 times 10 gives us 565.2. And now what we can do is we can add everything together. So we've got 254.34, add 254.34, add 565.2. And so that equals 1073.88 centimeters squared. Okay, right. Let's have a go at another one. Okay, so for question 2, we've got another cylinder, and this time it's in meters. So it says here, what is the total surface area of a cylinder with a radius of 8 meters and a height of 12 meters? Okay, so I'm going to draw my two circles and my rectangle again, just to help myself remember. Now, remember, the circles are pi r squared. So what we've got here is we've got 3.14 times 8 times 8, and that equals 200.96. Remember, we've got two of those, so I'm going to write that number in both of these circles. And now we've got the rectangle. So remember, this missing length of the rectangle is the circumference of the circle. So that is pi times radius times 2. So I'm going to do pi 3.14 times 8 times 2. Okay, and that equals 50.24. So I know that this length is 50.24 meters, okay, because it's a length. And now I'm going to multiply this by the other length, which is given to us by the height of the cylinder. So that is 12 meters. So the area of this rectangle will be 50.24 times 12, which equals 602.88 meters squared. Okay, so I'm going to write that inside the rectangle. And so now I've got all three of these shapes. I can add them together to get the total surface area. And that's going to give us 200.96 plus 200.96 plus 602.88. And altogether, that equals 1004.8 meters squared. Remember, it's meters squared because this is still an area. Even though it's a 3D shape, it's still an area. Okay, let's try another question. Okay, here we go. Question 3, and it's a surface area question, this time with fractions. Okay, so don't panic. Let's just take it piece by piece. So here we go. Find the surface area of a cylinder with a radius of 2 2/3 centimeters and a height of 5 3/4 centimeters. Okay, so because of the nature of this question, I am actually just going to turn these into decimals. If you happen to have a calculator which has a really good fraction button, you might just want to leave it as a fraction because that will give you a more accurate answer and it will help you out. But often I find that students I work with don't necessarily always have a calculator with the fancy fraction button on, and they don't often end up with those in the exam. So what I want to do is I want to just go through it with the method that you can use in your exam, and if you don't end up having the calculator with the fancy fractions button. Okay, so let's first of all work out these numbers into decimals. So 2 2/3 centimeters. That means that 2 is the whole part, so we know we've got 2 there. We need to convert the fraction into a decimal, so that's 2 over 3. So we do 2 divided by 3, and that equals 0.666666666. In order to keep it accurate, I am actually going to write down all these sixes. Well, I'm going to just write down ... just so that we know that they're all there. Okay, So the next one is 5 3/4. So we know here that we've got 5 holes, and then we need to work out the 3/4. So 3 divided by 4 is going to be 0.75. So 5 3/4 is 5.75. Okay, right. So we've got our dimensions now. 2.66666666 for the radius and 5.75 for the height. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to draw out my two circles for the top and the bottom. I'm going to draw out my rectangle for the curved surface area. Okay, so let's tackle the circles first. So we're going to have pi r squared, which is 3.14 times 2.666666 times 2.666666. Okay, I'm going to work this out on my calculator. That is going to give me 22.32888888888888. Okay, and I know that that's the same for both of these circles, so that's that. Now remember, the rectangle is the circumference on the top and the height on the side, so I can put the 5.75 at the side of the rectangle straight away, but for the circumference I need to work that out, and so that's going to be 3.14 times the radius times 2, which is going to be 3.14 times 2.6666666666 times 2. Okay, and that gives me 16.7466666666. So now that I've got that length is 16.74666666, I'm going to times that by my 5.75, and I'm going to get an area here of 96.29333333. And remember, these are all centimetres squared. Now that I've got the area of the circles and I've got the area of the rectangle, I can add these all together. And what I'm going to find is I'm going to do 22.3288888888, add 22.3288888888, add 96.2933333333, and then that equals 140.95111111. Okay, now that I've got this answer, I'm going to round to 141 to the nearest integer. Okay, integer means whole number. So I've rounded that to 141 centimetres squared. Okay, great. If you want more practice at these questions out of context, make sure that you go over to Crack Maths now. This was tutorial 50, and you can whiz through some of those. Otherwise, what we're going to do is I'm going to go on to some scenario questions. Here we go. We've got question 1 in a scenario. So it says, Mark is a builder and needs to determine the amount of paint needed to cover the curved edge and bottom of a cylindrical silo. The radius of the silo is 12 metres and the height is 15 metres. A tin of paint covers 10 metres squared. How many tins of paint does he need? Right, this is a very classic functional skills question. You see it all the time. So you need to find an area. You've got tins of paint which cover a certain amount of the area. You need to find out how many tins of paint you have. You've also got to be careful because they haven't just asked for the entire surface area of this question. They've only asked for the curved surface edge and one circle because they very specifically said just the bottom. But bearing that in mind, everything is just the same as usual. So we can just plod through this as we normally would. Okay, so let's first of all look at the fact that we've got one circle and one rectangle. Okay, so the radius of the silo is 12 metres. So we know that the area of the circle is going to be pi r squared, which is going to be 3.14 times 12 times 12. So I'm just going to do that on my calculator. So that equals 452.16 metres squared. Now what we have to do is we've got to work out the curved surface area. Okay, so we remember this is the rectangle, so it's got a height of 15, so we can put the 15 on our rectangle already. But the other length is given to us by the circumference, which we know is pi times radius times 2. Okay, so we're going to have to do 3.14 times 12 times 2. Okay, so let's work that out. Okay, so we've worked that out, and that equals 75.36. So now we've got the two dimensions of our rectangle, 75.36 for the bit that wraps around, and the height of 15. So we can now do 75.36 multiplied by 15, and that equals 1,130.4 meters squared. And goodness me, this is going to be a lot of tins of paint. I think you might want to rethink the tins that he's got. Okay, so let's add together the circle and the curved bit to find out the total surface area, and then we can start to work out how many tins of paint he wants. So we have 452.16 plus 1,130.4, so that equals 1,582.56 meters squared. Okay, so now we know that the tin of paint will cover 10 meters squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write this down with the meters squared on the left, because we want to go from meters to meters. We know how many meters squared one tin covers, but we know we have a set amount of meters squared that we need. So if I write here 10 meters squared equals 1 tin. Now what I can do is I can divide both sides by 10 to go down to 1. So we know that 1 meter squared requires 0.1 tins of paint. Okay, right, now that we know this, we can go straight to our 1,582.56 meters squared of paint. So 1 times 1,582.56 gives us 1,582.56 meters squared. Okay, and 0.1 times 1,582.56 equals 158.256 tins of paint. Now, we can't have a point of a tin of paint, and although this number would naturally round down, if we rounded this down, we wouldn't have enough paint to cover the silo. So we're going to have to go up to the next full tin. So that means that Mark is going to need to buy 159 tins of paint. I think you might notice that I filmed this last part on a separate day. Okay, right. Well done, everyone, if you've made it through that. The topic isn't that tough, it's just long, okay? But remember, as long as you know area of a circle, circumference of a circle, and the area of a rectangle, you know everything you need to piece this topic together. If you need more practice on this, you can go over to Crack Maths, and this was tutorial 50. Okay, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.